Three, two, one, here we go. Rainman's Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. I want to welcome back my guest, Dan Sheehan. Dan, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks, Brian. How about you?
I'm doing well, brother. I'm doing well. Before we get going, what I just want to pass on, if you like what we're doing here at Rainman's Take, the more in-depth interviews where we really take a deep dive into a subject. If you like what we're doing, please hit the like button and subscribe. That way we can keep bringing some top content. So with that being said, I wanted to have Dan back on because, as you remember, Dan was early on in Rainman's Tech. I think he was episode 4 and 5. He is a former Marine helicopter pilot, former FAC for Marine Special Operations Command. So he did 2 tours in Iraq, one as a pilot and then another one on the ground, and came back and wrote 2 great books. The first one was a book called After Action, and the second book was called Continuing Action. And this one, as you can see, it's heavily read by me. That one talks about Dan's just coming back from the war and PTSD and all those things. And quite honestly, that one had a big impact on me, as I'm sure it has with a lot of other soldiers out there. So let's start by doing this. Talk to me a little bit about the continuing actions and how it got on the Commandant's reading list. First of all, explain what that is, and then tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, thanks, Brian. Appreciate the kind words about my earlier works. Actually, it was After Action that got on the Commandant's reading list.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So General Berger, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Commandant of the Marine Corps has always maintained a professional reading list, a list of books that he wants all of his Marines to read. At least 5 titles from the list per year is the starting point. And in 2020, General Berger revamped the entire program, the entire reading list, and it had grown to over 100 titles. He scrubbed a bunch of those off and ended up putting, I think the current list is 46 or 47 titles long. So it's significantly pared down, and I was incredibly surprised and proud to have After Action listed on that shortened list. I was talking with the official Marine Corps librarian who runs the list and manages the website, and I was asking her if there were any other self-published titles that had ever been on the Commandant's reading list, and she researched it and said, "Nope, so I'll take that."
Oh, brother.
And move forward with it.
Nice. So obviously those are both nonfiction books. Yeah. Talk to me about why you transitioned into fiction, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. So my nonfiction titles were really important for me to write for a couple of different reasons. After Action was the tool that I used to unpack the experiences of the 2003 invasion from my Cobra and understand how those had come home with me, because I did get an opportunity to do everything I'd ever trained to do in the cockpit, and was very well prepared to go into combat. But I wasn't prepared at all for what I was going to have to face afterwards. And I think that this is a common challenge that returning veterans face, is how to unpack, how to decompartmentalize from the challenges or from what you do in war. That's not something that we'd ever been trained how to do. So After Action was my unpacking process, and writing it was how I came to understand what had followed me home. But after I finished After Action, and a couple of years later, I realized that while I'd figured out a lot about how I dealt with coming home and what helped me through those challenges, I realized that that information was spread out too thinly through a whole bunch of scholarly texts or texts written by mental health professionals for mental health professionals, using a language which was beyond, I mean, it took a lot for me to get through some of it. And what I wanted to do with continuing actions was to take a lot of those lessons learned and boil them down into the language of a squadron ready room or a squad bay anywhere in the military, and make it more accessible to the men and women who need it the most. And so Continuing Actions is a self-help book, as I like to describe it, for folks who wouldn't be caught dead reading a self-help book. So take a look at it and see what you think. But it's got a lot of good stuff in it for how to manage coming home.
And I can personally attest to that too. So real quick public service announcement here. If anybody's out there that's listening and either military, first responders, whoever it is, if you don't feel right on the inside, find somebody to talk to. VA, whoever it is, just find somebody to talk to. And that book, Continuing Actions, I highly recommend it. So let's switch gears now. So these came out, these are what, probably 15 years old, these books.
So 12 and 15 is when they came out. So we're coming up on 7 years for the second one.
Gotcha. Okay. So in that 7 years, what made you decide that you wanted to write fiction? Yeah.
So I through this process, I'd never written anything before I wrote After Action. Through the writing process, I discovered I really enjoyed it. And so I wanted to keep doing it, but I definitely didn't want to keep writing in the same vein. You know, I spent a lot of time in After Action and in Continuing Actions looking inwardly and kind of unpacking a lot of stuff inside myself and being very open about it. And that takes a toll as well. It's something that I didn't want to keep doing to that extent because, well, I didn't think what I was doing right now was that interesting anyways to continue talking about it. So I did want to continue writing, and had always really enjoyed authors who built it's a fantasy world, but it's based in reality. I don't do fairies and sword fights, and not epic fantasy stuff, but I like having a twinge of magic, maybe that interferes or pokes through the veil of normalcy that we all walk around in every day. I like reading authors like Christopher Moore who pull those things together and write some just amazingly interesting and just these adventures that you're like, what was this guy on when he came up with this? You know, those things really made me want to continue writing and be creative with it and come up with new stories. So that's why I switched over to writing in the contemporary fantasy genre at first, and now I'm more in the adventure fantasy genre.
Nice. And you can find out more about Dan at dansheehanauthor.com, where he goes into not only his nonfiction books, but also his fiction books. So the one's called Fate's Revenge.
And Fate's Revenge is still in work. I'm working on that still, and we'll be going through another serious round of edits before that one's really ready to go anywhere. But it's the Judas Goat right now. That's my current project.
Yeah. All right. Well, all right. So let's hit that first. So it's Judas Goat is out right now, but it's an interesting format. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So Amazon just started a new program called Kindle Vella. It's 2 words. It's not the easiest program to find, but if you go on the Amazon homepage and look in the drop-down menus, you go to the Kindle Fire or the Kindle Store, and click on that, and then you get another drop-down menu, and way at the bottom you'll see a little listing for Kindle Vella. The platform it's designed for serialized novels, and so what I do as an author is I have created a posting for the Judas Goat, and then I upload new episodes as I complete them. And those episodes are available to be downloaded on or to be read on your smartphone or tablet. And I think there's a way to read it on a Kindle, but it's really, despite the name, it's not really designed to be read on an e-reader. So these episodes and these parts of novels are designed to be read in kind of short snippets throughout your day. So what you'll find there is each episode is between 600 and 5,000 words long. And the first 3 episodes of any story are available for free. And so that's how Amazon gets you to get interested in a story. And then after that, you can purchase tokens and you redeem those tokens at a rate of, I think it's 1 token per 100 words for each episode. And so as I'm writing the Judas Goat, I've got 12 episodes available now. And the 13th is sitting on my computer as I'm pulling my hair out over a couple little issues with it, but that's part of the fun.
Now, is it basically those 12 episodes? Are they essentially a chapter in the book?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So they call them episodes, but I write mine so that they read like you would expect a normal chapter to read. Okay. So a little bit of a hint as to what's to come, or at least it ends with a leading you into the next. I don't do a whole lot of cliffhangers, but as those can get annoying if they're overdone.
So do you, now the Judas Goat, is that, are you writing it on the fly, or do you have a overall structure to it that as if you were writing a regular book? Yeah.
That's exactly it. I've got an overall structure. I've got it, I wouldn't say plotted out, but I know the general arc, and I have the big picture, the big blue arrow motions already templated out for what I want the characters to do and where the story's going to go. The main character is a secondary character. He's an ancillary character for Fate's Revenge, the novel that I had started writing a little while ago. The further I delved into his backstory, the more I discovered, well, I got a full story here to tell. And so when Kindle Vella was proposed and when it came out, I was like, well, hell, I've got a story right here. Let me use that. And being at a crossroads of sorts with my writing career, transitioning between nonfiction to fiction, I figured that Kindle Vella was a perfect avenue to, I wouldn't say test the waters, because I'm committed to going into the fiction realm, but it's a way to give readers who may have found me through my nonfiction, give them a taste of what my fiction might be like, and see if they want to continue following me on through there. So, which I hope everybody will.
And so is it so each episode comes out once a week? So
that's my goal. Yeah.
Okay. So you're committed to actually writing and making sure you get those chapters. Okay.
Yeah. And it's, some weeks flow a little bit easier than others, but that's the writing game for you. And so far I've been able to keep to about 1 per week coming out. After I do my part with it and get it as tight as I can, I send it off to my sister, and she gives me the good line edits, fixes all my horrendous commas and hyphens, and then sends it back to me. And once that comes back, then I upload it, and it's live shortly thereafter. So yeah, this is since we launched in late July. And I already had 4 or 5 episodes ready to go then. Yeah. But since then, it's just been steady production, one per week, and it's been a very good process, and it's kept me focused. So that's helpful too.
And how many episodes are you planning for? How many do you think it's going to become? So
this could be between 30 and 40. Wow, is okay. how it plots out in what I've got right now. Some of those episodes may be, what I've found is that some things that I think will take 1 episode actually end up being bigger than that, and some are smaller. You know, and one of the best learning points for doing this for me has been the being very strict, I guess, with how the story flows, and realizing the difference between writing something to fill pages and writing something to push the story ahead. And it's very easy to get lost in kind of creating something and let the story meander, but I can't do that. I have to keep the story moving quickly. Otherwise, you just won't get people reading beyond the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
So
interesting. It reminds me of the whole Game of Thrones. I think, what was it, like the first 4 or 5 seasons were good, and then after that, everybody wanted more, and they basically had to start writing from just off the top of their head for the next 2 or 3 seasons. So
yeah,
that's crazy. All right, so explain a little bit. Kindle Vella. What is Vella? Is novella? That's what it's short for.
Yeah.
And so that has been around for a while, right?
So the serialized novel format has been around for a long time.
Okay.
Guys like Jack London used to write a chapter or an episode of a story and sell it to a newspaper or a magazine, and that's how a lot of authors found their initial paying gigs, and it kind of fell by the wayside as print publications did. And it became easier and easier for anybody to self-publish a hard copy book. Yeah. So there have been other platforms available. I think Wattpad. There's another one that's a subscription service. I just saw that Salman Rushdie is going to put a book out through that subscription service. So I mean, there are ways to do serialized novels. But I already had all my work up on Amazon to begin with. So when they launched Kindle Vella, that was an easy choice to get in on that and to continue monetizing my work.
Very cool. All right, so it's called The Judas Goat is what he has on Kindle Vella. And again, DanSheehanAuthor.com if you want to learn a little bit more about Dan, and go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe if you like what we're doing here. So let's get into it. Crazy title of a book. What is the Judas Goat?
Yeah. So the Judas Goat is it's a term used to describe strangely enough, a goat used on some farms that is specially trained to lead the other domesticated animals between paddocks and between pastures, and also at the end to the slaughterhouse. And so these animals get used to following the goat around. And so when it's time for the end, they follow the goat right in, and then they're finished off and off to the butcher. Now, so the Judas Goat, that's one way that it's been used. But funnily enough, or when I was researching it and thought about it as a potential title, I Googled it and it popped up, and it turns out that bomber commands during World War II in Europe used to utilize a totally worn beat bomber as the Judas Goat for their squadron. So imagine you've got 400 aircraft coming from 6 different bases all around England, all coming up to stack up and to join up to get into their main formation to start their attack on Germany. So you would have, they all look the same. There's sitting there in binoculars trying to pick out the numbers of the aircraft. You wouldn't know who your leader is and who's supposed to be doing what. And so what these bomber commands would do is the first aircraft to launch would spiral up, and it would be the Judas Goat. This bomber would be painted in polka dots or big white stripes, look like a zebra. These things were they were as loud and garish as could be, because they weren't going to go over into the combat zone. They were simply to get up so that each member of that squadron or that group could find their Judas Goat bomber, form up off of that, and then the Judas Goat bomber would get them going in the right direction, peel off and then head back down to base, while the rest of the bombers went over into their bombing run or into the combat zone. So once I found that, that fits in pretty well with what my main character ends up providing to the story. So once I figured that out, it was an easy kill.
Yeah, I'd never heard that phrase before, and then when you told me about the bomber story, that would make an awesome History Channel episode.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. So, all right, Judas Goat, talk to me. Talk to me about the overall fantasy aspect of it, and then kind of talk a little bit about how you decided to go with this particular genre.
Sure. So the basic storyline for the Judas Goat is a young English privateer in the early 1600s, out on his first journey, trying to make some money. He's living up to his dad's heroic legacy, and ends up receiving a strange gift, let's say, on one of the prizes. This gift is a box of hallucinogenic mushrooms and other drugs, and that the god Pan has delivered straight to him. What happens from that point on involves a lot of shenanigans, shipboard shenanigans that end up killing Dave, my main character, and puts him in a wager with Hades. And so in order to win a second chance at life, Dave is challenged to change his destiny. So Hades tosses him forward into time, and he's he ends up inhabiting some of his future reincarnations, and he's challenged to change his destined death. And so the template that I have now has him starting out as a privateer, gets tossed into the golden age of piracy, and then off into World War II in the South Pacific, and then Vietnam in 1969. I have him in as a LERP team leader. And then at that point, that's where he becomes the man that we meet in the novel that I'm working on. So this whole period, or this whole story, the Judas Goat story, brings my character Dave Gillespie through that process, and then drops him off in the novel that I'm also working on as well. So why the fantasy genre? I like it. It's fun. There's a lot of stuff that you can do in the fantasy genre. You can go as epic as you want, or you can have simply a weird possessed item that interacts in the real world with people. You can go as far as you want with that, and I really like that as a world to inhabit and to create in. And like I said, I don't really enjoy the epic fantasy world where everything has a weird name and there's all sorts of different languages. I know some people really do enjoy that. I like a contemporary fantasy, so a normal world that has interactions with a fantasy world. And the window, or the tool that I use to bridge the gap between those realities, are hallucinogenic drugs. And so that's where the magic mushrooms come into play, and the Judas Goat at the beginning. Talking with folks who enjoy magic mushrooms and other things, they really do describe some transcendental experiences, some really mind-blowing internal and external journeys that they go on that really provide a lot of fodder for me to harvest when coming up with these stories.
And that's wild, because you hear about the shamans and the South American doctors, the whole concept of the ayahuasca and all those things, where
Yeah.
they just they literally are transported into a different dimension.
Yeah, and that's the difference between, you know, recreational use of hallucinogens and recreational use of drugs and a more spiritual journey use, and having, you know, I think that you can really you really will have a much different experience, I think, if you have a trusted guide leading you through one of these experiences. If I sitting in your basement looking at a blacklight, you know, Led Zeppelin poster, you know, you'll have some experiences doing that. But if you want to really if you really want to experience, I think the true transformation that you can get through from what I've read, you can get through these hallucinogens, then you should do it with somebody who knows.
Yeah. And with Dave, who's his guide?
He doesn't really have one.
So he's just winging it.
He's winging it. Yep. And that's I say he doesn't have a guide. He does. It's Pan, because once Dave starts playing with his newfound toys in the box, that opens the door for Pan to enter into his head, and they have some pretty fun, engaging conversations as Pan is nudging or directing Dave in the direction that he needs to go for the story, and with all of which becomes more clear the further you get in as to why Dave was chosen in the first place, and then what Pan is trying to get him to do.
You a couple of the first episodes when Dave is getting ready to board that one target ship, the Spanish ship, it's pretty detailed in terms of what life was like on a sailing ship like that. So how much research, I mean, would you consider this like a historical fiction, or is it more, how much research did you do?
So I did a lot of research on it. I would not call it historical fiction because I take significant liberties with the story and with the events that are on there. You know, for example, I use a 12-pound cannon. You know, exactly whether it would have been a 12-pound cannon on a caravel of that time frame, not 100% sure, but it fits for the story, and that's where I use that. But I did do a lot of research, read a lot of books about piracy in particular. And again, this is a privateer in the age of the Elizabethan sea dogs, but the difference between a pirate and a privateer was just a piece of paper.
Yeah. And
to the target ship, there was no difference whatsoever. So I did do a lot of research on that. And what also kind of, I think, helps to create that world is that the human experience of being on the cusp of your first battle is universal. You know, if you were sitting on a Viking longboat ready to jump off and start a raid, or like my character Dave is squatting behind a railing waiting for the grappling hooks to pull the ships together so he can hop over and board, or flying a gunship into a rock. You know, that feeling of your entire life has led you up to this moment, and that clarity of purpose, and the intense anticipation. You know, there's the fear, there's the exhilaration, there's the holy shit, this is happening feeling that you get, and that's doesn't matter time or situation. That's just a human reaction.
And also, that's kind of since time immemorial. Also, what you're talking about as well is that deal with the devil, that idea of selling your soul for something. That's also very much a human. Now, is it, because you got Hades, you got Pan, those are obviously mythological creatures. do you go much into that part of it, or is it more just like they're just kind of, you just kind of pull them out of that and into your?
So I do. There's always a trick with writing, and to provide enough backstory so that everybody gets what you're talking about, so that your readers understand where you are, but not so much backstory that you slow down the passage or slow down the motion, the movement of the story. You want to get that momentum and keep it going. So I do explain my characters, even though you'll recognize their names as Pan, Hades, and then we'll get in deeper in that. You'll meet Satan, you'll meet Hecate, you meet Dionysus, Hermes. All these characters are in there, and their names do bring a little bit of who they are to the story. But what I found, and why I enjoy using mythological names and mythological characters, is that the myths leave a huge amount of gray area to exploit. There's a whole bunch of differences in myths depending on when they were written, why they were recorded. They had a purpose behind them. And if you read the Greek myths with a, let's say, I guess, if you read them and understand why they were, what was going on in those societies at that time, then what you can find is that there are a lot of gaps in the stories that are brushed over. And pulling those gaps out, exploring those has been what I really enjoy about using mythological characters. And I've created all my gods, so to speak, are figments of my imagination, things that I take bits of what they have been recorded as through the myths, and then apply my own understanding of what was going on in the world at that point to project them forward into the real world. And so most of the gods are just as capricious as the stories say. But one of the main things that I picked up on, and through reading Robert Graves' work and some other mythologists, the main reason that the myths are as they are today was that, that they were so male dominated, was because the societies were actually shifting over from a matriarchal society to patriarch. And so everything female had been strong, had been the source of life, had been the elevated goddess, the triple goddess. It was what everyone worshiped. Yeah. And then then it became the power dynamic changed, and for whatever reason, the men decided, okay, we need to change the gods so that the male gods now are supreme. Is
there a historical, like, when did that happen?
I'm sure there is. Yeah. And
that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
About that.
I mean, it all has to tie in with, I'll step beyond myself here, but yes, yeah. There is, these stories end, quote unquote, with the men on top, and Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, the three bigs. They own the universe. They run the show. What happened to the women, however? You want to tell me really that Demeter is going to go ahead and basically kill off all life on the planet if she doesn't get her daughter back, and then she's just going to go, oh, okay, everything's fine because she ate a pomegranate seed, and so okay, I'll take time sharing and then happily ever after. Hell no. You've been married long enough to know that if you piss your wife off that bad, you're going to pay for it. Yeah. And so she is a big character in the trilogy that I have going forward. And so I'm getting beyond my Judas Goat story, but Hecate was the original goddess of the dead. She was the underworld. She lived on the moon, and that's where she cycled the souls through, and she was it. And then the Olympians come in, Hades takes over the underworld, and then Hecate, if you know about her at all, then she's just a witch who hangs around somewhere and has dogs. Okay, so is that real? Really, she's just going to step aside and let Hades and everybody else run the underworld? I don't think so.
So you use your imagination to fill in those.
Yeah, I find those gaps, and then I build my story within that gap. And because there are so many conflicts from the myths that are absolutely unresolved, and it's just, I'm the man and I say so, and everybody goes, yay! Like that's not the way this works. So I find those gaps and exploit them in mine.
Love it. You mentioned something a couple minutes back about the emotions of getting ready for your first combat. Obviously, you've been through that. How hard was it to put that down into words?
I think it would have been a lot harder had I not done it so many times in After Action. And if I hadn't spent those years that it took me to write that book, living in those moments over and over and over again, I think it would have been much more difficult. But it's, I wouldn't say it's in the forefront of my mind, because I'm in a good place now where I can move back and forth between the experiences of combat and, walking the dogs on a daily basis. I don't get trapped in either one anymore. And so that's a real benefit to having written and spent so much time figuring that out. So no, it was there, and it's just another tool that I can access. I mean, there's always the old adage to write what you know. And I know what it feels like to be in that situation.
Yeah. So how much research, now you're just going back to what you were just talking about, the gaps in the mythology. How much research is required to do that? Or are you're just kind of using your own imagination to kind of fill that in? Or are you trying to be accurate to that story kind of?
So the accuracy or when I was researching continuing actions, I tied a lot of my personal journey to what Joseph Campbell described as the hero's journey, which is a universal human template that's found in myths throughout cultures around the world. That got me interested in mythology in the first place. And the more I got into it, the more I wanted to tie it down to concrete. I wanted to find, at this point, this happens, this happened. I wanted to really get into concrete examples of what happened when and which gods did what. And it drove me insane, because depending on which version of a myth you read, the god's parents were these two, or the god didn't have parents, the god just popped out of somebody's thigh, or whatever. There were differences depending on which ancient author recorded it. And it was extremely frustrating. But Campbell's work helped me kind of elevate out of the details and find the main themes of that and go, okay, that's what's important here. It's not quite the details that's important, but the frustration that I felt at those differences in the myths is what I came back to later on when I started coming up with my own stories and going, okay, well, if these guys changed the myths depending on what they wanted to say, then why can't I? And so that became, I didn't want to change, easy stuff. I didn't want to make Zeus become the king of the underworld. I mean, that wouldn't, who cares? But what I wanted to find are those gaps and those unresolved conflicts that we're supposed to think just ended when the myth was penned. And in my mind and in my little fantasy universe. They didn't end, and the gods are with us now in the alternate reality, and the conflicts continue. And so, how do those conflicts play out? Well, that's those are the stories in the modern world. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, and that book is called Fate's Revenge, and you said that you're still working on that, but you're able to obviously pull Dave Gillespie out of it. It seems to me like that could be an unending source of subject matter.
Well, that's my hope. I really enjoy this world that I've created, and there's, like you said, there's no end to ideas and places, things to mine. You can mine all sorts of great stuff out of the myths, and with just one little thread, you can turn it into some big story. And it took probably over a year of sitting there and kind of thinking through things, going, okay, what about this character? What about this person? What about this god? How did she feel when that happened? And to come up with this universe that I've created in my head, and that I want to tell my stories within, that took a lot of time and energy. And I really want to write a lot about what takes place in this universe. And I mentioned Christopher Moore earlier as an author that I really enjoy reading. He has done that with his characters. And so if you read his books, a character from 3 books ago will pop up in his next book. And the more you read of him, the more you can appreciate how he weaves those stories together, and how he brings in some random demon from someplace. You're like, oh, I remember that guy. He was fun.
Yeah.
I like that. And I like reading an author who can do that. So that's what I'm striving to emulate with at least the concept of writing multiple stories within this universe.
Yeah. What is your timeline? It's DanSheehanAuthor.com if you want to learn more about Dan. And he also has on the website, he also has excerpts where you can kind of read a little bit and kind of get a feel for what's going on there. So in terms of Fate's Revenge, is that kind of indefinite out there, or?
Nobody's banging on my door to get it done right now. So I'm focusing on getting the Judas Goat completed. And once that is done, then I'll be in a better place to put a pause on the weekly production goals, and revamp, do some of the major, I would say the major weeding and some restructuring that needs to happen in Fate's Revenge as it now sits. I like the way the story is, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm taking a step back from it, because it doesn't quite work as well as it needs to. And so I need to step back before I'm going to be ready to go in there with a kukri and start cutting things out.
Yeah. What now? It's intimidating just to listen to you talk about how hard it is to write something like this. Do you have like a war room in your house where you've got stickies all over the walls to kind of keep track of everything? How do you do that? I do. We have a storage room up in our condo, and that had been my writing room for a while. There's one light in the ceiling. There are no windows. Smells like something died somewhere. But I've got this whole place with sticky notes all over, and that's how I did a lot of my initial kind of brainstorming and ideas for the books. But what I found was that I became too tied to what I'd done, what I'd created on the sticky notes. And it was tough to go, all right, now I got to move 75 of these effing things over here, over there. And, it's just more of a hassle. Yeah. So actually I transitioned over to using a set of software called Scrivener, and it's designed for authors. It's got a whole bunch of author-friendly tools that you can use. It's word processing,
but with like a couple of clicks, you can take your document and put it into a standard manuscript format. You can do all sorts of neat things with it, but it also provides a single place for all your research and all your ideas. And so I've switched over to using that, and I'm finding it much more user-friendly, much easier to move things around and to maintain flexibility with the story as it develops.
What's the plan with the Judas Goat when you're done with it? You're going to turn that into a book, or is that in the cards at all?
Well, that depends on you, the reader. So if it has
Kindle Vella, the Judas Goat,
hit it, like it, and I think you get to assign a favorite to the story if you like it a lot. So those help as well. But yeah, once I'm complete with the story, if it is generating readers and readers are finding it and enjoying it, then I'll leave it sit there, and then it can be there for a while. And if as readership develops and as this program develops, that may become the main avenue I may put the next story on that. So it's brand new and the possibilities are wide open. So for now, I'm going to complete the Judas Goat and post the entirety of that story on Kindle Vella. And we'll see where things sit in. I guess it'll probably take me another 6 months or so to finish that story and get it all out. We'll see where things are at that point. Yeah. And if it's doing well, then I'll let it ride. If it's not, then that's the point where I'll probably let it ride for a bit while I go back through and run through some edits to probably condense and get it down a little bit smaller and get it ready for a standalone novel format.
Gotcha.
So
what now in the Judas Goat, can people anticipate those types of interactions with? So when Dave, let's say when he's in Vietnam, is Pan gonna show up, or?
Oh, you just got to read and find out.
Okay. All right, there we go. I don't want to give too much of it away. That's interesting. Yeah, that's the one, talking to you before about all of this, that's the one thing that really is, I find impressive, just authors in general, is the idea of taking that imagination based on something and then putting it into your story. And the chapters that I have read so far with the Judas Goat have been very, very cool. So
thanks.
It's and so you have or have not done the mushrooms?
No, I haven't done the mushrooms.
How do you describe those trips? What have you been using as your research for that?
Funny you should ask, because I brought the book that has been my guide through this. Now, full disclosure, I did get into the Marine Corps on a weed waiver, so I will own that. But this book by Cody Johnson is called Magic Medicine, and it's the modern day use of psychedelic plants and substances. It's got all sorts of crazy stuff in it about, or I say crazy stuff. It's got a whole bunch of good information about natural medicines and the compounds that societies have used to have these transcendental experiences throughout history. I mean, you want to figure out what fish to lick, it's in there. So it's a fun book if you're interested in that sort of stuff. But that has been this book has really opened my eyes to the whole world of psychedelics, and explained a lot of how they have been used in a traditional manner, vice how we picture them, how we're kind of conditioned to imagine the use of drugs in our modern culture. And so that's, again, the difference between recreational and spiritual use of these items. It's a neat book. It has a lot of good stuff.
And you think that that's what, when they go on those trips, and they've probably been doing this for forever. Do you think that's where mythology comes from?
Well, I think that's where a lot of people's understanding of the universe that we live in comes from, and kind of the explanations as to why things happen the way they do. those are concepts that we like to assign to, to Plato, to Socrates, to big thinkers, to philosophizers. But in reality, a group in the Amazon rainforest has a concept of what this is about and why they're there, what is controlling their lives, the forces that they see in action in their lives. They have an understanding of what is causing that. And much of the shaman's responsibility is connecting the members of their group to the spiritual, to the greater. And that's an interesting tool. As the more I read about that, the more I realized that this is a window between worlds. If I want to have two different realities operating at the same time, then I've got to have some way to get between them, some way that's not always available, and some way that does break down the barriers. And these drugs certainly appear to break down the barriers about in our own minds of what we consider to be reality.
Yeah, that's wild. And so obviously Dave is going to be using that. And is that where like when he first meets Hades, is that off of a trip or?
Oh no, he's dead. He's dead as a doornail when he meets Hades.
Oh, okay. That's right. Okay.
But souls don't die. Yeah. So souls are in my little mythological world. There's this whole thing called the cycle of souls, and so lives go. You're born. You animate a body. You go through your life cycle, and then according to the fates, how they describe your life, and then you die, and your soul goes down to Hades, and then you get purified, and then you come back to life. And so you have it's constant recycle. In my little universe, souls are not created nor destroyed. We started with a certain number, and we'll finish with a certain number. They just keep getting recycled over time, and that's why I can throw Dave forward into a future life, and why Hades would be very interested if Dave can actually change his destiny. Because if he can do that, then this great big goddess of necessity that everybody fears and everybody thinks runs everything behind the scenes isn't quite as scary as everyone thinks. So then Hades can do what he wants to do. So getting beyond myself, but
damn, that sounds very much like Hinduism or Buddhism. The idea of reincarnation. Do you delve into any of that religious part of it, or no?
I try to steer away from the religious aspects of it, and with the exception of poking a little bit of fun here and there. But I find that getting too far into the weeds with any particular religious belief structure is less enjoyable than making up a full one on your own. So I'm sure that my idea of the afterlife and my idea of the cycle of souls is not completely mine. And I'm sure that I've pulled from things that I've read throughout times and whatnot. So if there are folks who believe in reincarnation, more power to you. I'm just having fun. So
I love it. All right. So you're 12 episodes into roughly 36. So you're thinking you could be done in what, a year and a half type of thing?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. And I'll keep going as quickly as I can. What I've found is that the actual physical act of writing doesn't take any time at all. You can sit down and you can plop out a novel length piece of writing in a month. The trick is figuring out what it is that you want to say. Yeah. So it really depends on how much time I have to come up with that spare, or to have that creative space to come up with what it is that needs to happen in the story. And it helps to have a basic template to begin with, and where I see the main arc. But, if we end up going back into lockdown and the kids are home from school again and everything else, then I'll be relearning, 8th grade math and trying to figure that out instead of writing my stories. So we'll see where we're at.
What are you doing right now to promote it, or is it just primarily on the new Kindle Vella, and how's that, the whole promo going?
So the promo side of it is always a challenge. Writing is only half the battle. It's actually, getting the word out there. So I've made a list of the absolute top podcasts available in the world, and that's what brought me to RAINMAN'S Take. And so that's where I was like, this is how I
think I'm just below Joe Rogan experience.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's doing, conversations like this and explaining what it is that I'm trying to do that helps spread the word. I'm on Twitter, but I'm pretty inactive. I basically scroll around, and usually after maybe 2 beers, then I'll send some tweets and I'll have some fun with it. But for the most part, social media is less of an enjoyable aspect of my day. Yeah. So I don't spend much time on it, but I do maintain the website, DanSheehanAuthor.com. I've got a blog on there that has a lot of stuff, including actually I put all of Continuing Actions on my blog. So for anybody who's interested, you can go back in a little bit of time in my blog, and you can find each chapter in its entirety right there. So you can read it at your leisure. I've gotten far too many of those day after calls from buddies going, "Oh shit, somebody killed themselves again," or another guy, another person, and I'm sick of it, and everybody else is too. So Continuing Actions is what I want to do to help, and if I can make it available quickly and easily by putting it on my website, then that's what I did. So don't wait till it gets too dark. Yeah, take a look at it.
Yeah, no, that's huge, and there's somebody out there who'll listen, whether it's the VA, whoever. Just find somebody. One last question. Going back to Judas Goat. So when you go on to, I think if you just go on Amazon, you put in Judas Goat, the cover comes up, no?
No, if you just go if you're on the homepage of Amazon and you type in the Judas Goat, you won't find it.
Okay.
So you got to go to Kindle Vella. And so if you're on the homepage, go to the drop-down menu on the left, and on my browser, it usually pops up to show either Kindle Store, or you can drop down to, I think you have to go to all departments, and then you can find Kindle Store or Kindle Fire and e-readers, whatever. Click on that, and that'll bring you up to, Kindle Unlimited and Kindle this, Kindle that. At the bottom of that, you'll find a selection for Kindle Vella. Click on that, and then you can search, and then you get a search bar inside of Kindle Vella. Type in the Judas Goat, and it'll pop right up. And the artist on that was my daughter. She did the drawing for it, and we've had some interesting discussions about hallucinogenic mushrooms since that point. But that's the way it goes sometimes.
It's got very much a Yellow Submarine vibe from the Beatles. So, well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate your time, brother.
Thanks for having me.
No, this is great. And again, it's DanSheehanAuthor.com, Kindle Vella, the Judas Goat, and then someday down the road, it will be Fate Revenge. So
that's it.
I really appreciate your time, Dan. And I'll finish off by saying, if you're in the military, the police departments, fire departments, your first responders, if that's you out there, stay safe. Thank you very much for your service. Dan Sheehan, the Rain Man. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching RAINMAN'S Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow RAINMAN'S Take on Instagram at RAINMAN'S Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.